Okay, and now we have our final speaker for tonight, and that is Dillon. So,
Hello.
welcome, Dillon.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. So, you're going to present a marketplace app that you've built with Blitz.js and Prisma.
Yeah.
And you're going to showcase how easy it was for you to work with relations. I'm going to give a little introduction. So you are actually the founder of a product studio called Creators Never Die, and you're working and experimenting with your own products, but also cooperating with a wide range of clients, ranging from rapper Waka Flocka, which I really want to know more about,
Okay.
and fitness studios. And you're joining us from Canada, if I'm correct.
From Toronto, Ontario. Yeah.
So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Cool. So you ready to share your screen?
Yes, let me do that now. Maybe what I'll do is I'll go through my slides first, and then I'll demo the marketplace afterwards to show exactly how it works. So let me do that now. Maybe what I'll do is this. Okay. So you able to you can see my screen?
Yep.
Perfect. Okay, so this talk is about mostly how I work with Prisma now for client projects. So little introduction about me. I'm a BFG, which stands for Big Freaking Geek. I'm also the founders of Creators Never Die, which, as you said, is a product studio that I founded a few years ago, working on my own products and also clients' products. We got approached to create a marketplace, which was a great concept to get our feet wet with Blitz.js and Prisma. As I've been watching them closely, I was trying to find a good project to start working with. Coming from a Rails background, the mix of the two really felt like home. The speed of development was insane compared to manually setting up migrations and different ORMs with Express.js. It got pretty tedious doing the same task over and over again, which is why I felt like the Blitz and Prisma stack was great to work with. Funny enough, as this is a migrations talk, my favorite Prisma features so far definitely are the CRUD queries, setting up the models in the schema, and hence the relations, and the migrations, which made it really easy to collaborate with the team and making sure everyone's database is up to par. Creating a product in the marketplace required the following models, which was the storefronts. So many users could open up their own storefront and start selling products on their own storefront. The products themselves and variants, the variant children, and variant inventory. So the variants itself were kind of like a container variant. So in this case, if you want to think of selling t-shirts, for example, there could be colors, different color t-shirts, different sizes, or if you're selling laptops, for example, different memory speed, etc. The children itself would be related to the variants. So in that case, so if we're selling t-shirts, the colors would have different colors. So a red t-shirt or a green t-shirt, for example, or different sizes, small, medium, large. And then actually keeping track of inventory, which was associated to the variant children. So as you can see, there was a huge nest of relations, and dealing with forms is usually pretty complicated, but actually we had a pretty good time doing it with Blitz and Prisma. So as I said, working with relations in Prisma was a breeze, especially when dealing with nested forms. We ended up using on the front end React Final Form, along with the mutator that they supply called React Final Form Arrays. Let me know if you're able to see the code. I'm not sure, but this is kind of a redacted code showing how to set up the array mutator for the outside form components. So you could see it's just a matter of adding the array mutators to the actual mutator, and then having our variant field components, which I will get into now. This might be a little too small. If it is, when I actually demo the marketplace, I'll actually go through the code on my screen. Are you able to see this, or is it too small?
It's a bit too small, yeah.
Too small? Okay, so I'll get back to that when I go through the actual code in Marketplace. Prisma made it really easy to create and query products. I was able to traverse down through all relations by using the include syntax, which was great for allowing us to showcase the variants and prices associated to them, which I will also go through. Although one issue we did come across was adapting the data to work with the nested forms. So we ended up hacking together what we call an adapter that checks which Prisma write options to use. So for example, knowing when to use create versus connect or delete, etc., got pretty complicated when working with arrays within arrays within arrays. So sending back the data as is won't work because we want to create actual entries in the database for the variant and the associated variant children and inventory. So the adapter sends back the data adapted to the structure Prisma is expecting. Again, I don't know if you could see the code. I hope you can, but the data without the adapter would just send back a simple JSON with, like I said, arrays within arrays. But then when we wrote the adapter, this is how the data ended up coming back, which was perfect. How the adapter works, we ended up creating a get diff function, which if you don't know, it's just finding the difference between the initial array of data, if there is, and the actual values being sent back. So that calculated the two objects. The diff function had 4 params, which is the value, the current data being sent from the form, the initial data, and then the mapper function, so when we needed to access the array within the array, for example, and then a force connect, which if we wanted to have like actual definitive control when to use connect versus update, we could just set a Boolean of actually using connect. So the get diff function itself contained 3 filter variables, which would be the create, update, and remove. So what that did is each filter through the supplied data from the actual value params and will actually determine what to use, whether it's create, update, or remove. This is the code itself. Again, might be too small, and if anyone really wants to see the code, I have no problem sharing it, and as it could be quite useful for future projects. So maybe I'll send it in the comments, or you could hit me up on Twitter, and I'd be happy to help. So this is, as you can see, the create variable, the update variable, the remove variable, which are just simple filter functions. And then we return the object. So whether there is, let's say, for example, data that is in the newly created create array from above that variable, then we use the actual create write option, or else it comes back as undefined. And the same for update / connect or delete. Then we export the product adapter function that accepts the values and initial value params. So this is the actual function that's being used inside of your onSubmit with the form. So the product adapter just returns all the data while using the previous get diff function for arrays. So in this code here, so as you can see, the product has variants. So if there are variants, for example, use the get diff function to sift through all the data and use the correct write option. So as you can see, inside of the onSubmit, or in this case with Blitz.js, if you're not familiar, Blitz.js offers mutations for writing data and then queries for querying data. So you could really use it in either the onSubmit or inside of the actual mutation, which you can see here, we're just sending the data as a param inside of the product adapter. But it seems Prisma is already working on something similar, allowing us just to supply a foreign key directly, which is pretty useful. But I'm not positive. I think this is only working with Connect. Either way, this I feel a pretty good feature. And then, yeah, so we're finally at a point in the JavaScript ecosystem where things are just starting to work, and that gets me excited as we like to work with one syntax, one language. I plan on using Blitz and Prisma for most projects here on out, so that's pretty cool. And also, if anyone's looking for contract work, feel free to hit me up on Twitter. And that's that. So what I'll do now is maybe go through my actual marketplace. So let's see, let me share my full screen. Okay. So let me just start it up. All right. Perfect. Give it a sec. There we are. So just making sure I'm logged in. I already got things set up, and for time purposes, I created a test storefront with the actual product itself. And just to show you how that is nice to query, for example, if we quick view this product, as I was talking about here, the variants. So the variant parent being the color, and then variant children being green, and then the inventory counter, for example, and it's just simple to add to cart. But what I'll actually go through is showcasing the nested forms and creating the product itself. So I'm just going to go to the storefront settings here. I'm going to go into products and then add a product. Yeah, it's still a little work in progress as we've been focusing on actually handling shipping, so printing shipping labels. That's been our main focus right now. So it's still a little front end is still getting there. So let's create a test product 2. As you can see, I've done this a bit. Anyways, we will just select the category. For now, we only are using uncategorized. We'll upload some images. So in this case here, we are able to choose between whether the product itself is actual physical product or a digital product. If it's physical, we'll just enter in how big the actual product is for shipping purposes when we actually create the shipping label for you. We'll just enter in random info. So this is now when we get into the nested forms. So I'll just press here, and so now this is the actual variant parent. So in this case, again, I'll stick with color just for simplicity. And then I will create another nested array that's associated with that variant, like so, which gives me a different form. So in this case, we could say this is the color red. Let's say $100, just a random SKU number. You could put a sale price if we want to put the item on sale, and then another upload form for that. And now we are able to actually add the inventory for that. So as you can see for the model above, we're going to choose the red variant, and we'll just say there's 100 of them in stock. And so if we submit, it'll create the product and then take us back to the page where, again, we see the variants and would be able to select different variants, and it would update the price on the fly. I guess I could also show the checkout process, or maybe I'll go through the actual adapter code itself. So to show you how that all works. So here is the adapter. I'll zoom in. Is that good? I'm assuming so. So as I was saying, here's the getDiff function, where it's accepting the value params, the initial data. We'll have the mapper param, and then whether we're using force connect. And then we'll have each variable, which will loop through the values from the form that's being submitted. Or in this case, we'll filter if there's no item in the array, then we'll end up adding that to the create array, or update and remove. And then this is where I guess you could say the magic happens. So if there's anything in the create variable above, then run through it and use the create write method. Otherwise, it's undefined. Here is where we update, or in this case, if we're using force connect, where if there is already a item in the database, use a connect write method. And here we're just running through to see, for example, if there's children associated with that array, and to see actually which values are updated and which aren't. So that is a little bit of a hack, and we're working on cleaning that up. But and then the delete. And so as you can see, we just return the actual object with the rest of the values. But in this case, for the variance or the quantity / inventory, we're using the getDiff function. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Be happy to answer questions also if anyone has. I don't know if I went too fast or too slow.
Thank you, Dillon. That was quite interesting to see. So you've built this with Blitz, and I think one of the first questions that I was curious about. So Blitz is a React-based framework that integrates Prisma, and the whole idea behind it is that you don't have to sort of define this API layer, right? You have you expose these functions essentially from your backend, and you can call them from your front end. And one of the things that I was curious about when sort of looking through your presentation, which was really insightful, does the getDiff function actually run on the front end or on the back end of this?
That's being run on the back end. That's being run on the server. And yeah, so that's the great thing with Blitz, really, because we started off using Next.js, which is what Blitz is built on top of. And then we would have to write, let's say, an API with whether it's Express or Rails. And then sometimes, of course, there's times where you want to have microservices and have, the backend on its own separate server, and at the front end on a separate server. But traditionally, I think the whole monolithic framework approach really makes it easier to work with a team and developers and just get the bigger picture of the product. And so Blitz does a very good job at that. So separating the actual backend code when it needs to, and then the front end code with Next. So really, so yeah, that getDiff, for example, is being run on the backend, whether it's in the mutation, like I said, or the on submit. So yeah, technically it could be run on both ends. In this case, it's not backend for us.
Cool. We'll see if there's any questions coming out. If you have any questions, this is the moment to ask them. And if not, I'd like to thank you again, Dillon, for showing a bit of how you work with Prisma and Blitz.js. And I hope to see you soon. And
for sure. Thanks for having me.
Pleasure.